Okay. So class, good day. So again, we're going to have a discussion of our review of governance and auditing concepts, including the code of professional ethics coming from ISPPIA, or International Standards for the Professional Practice of Internal Auditing. So for the first discussion, no, again, we'll be going to the topic corporate governance. And when we say corporate governance, no, this is the combination, no, of people, policy, and procedures and processes that help ensure that an entity effectively and efficiently directs its activity toward meeting the objectives of its stakeholders. So meaning, no, it's just not mere parang overseeing only the operations, but when we say governance, no, again, it's the combination of people, policy, procedures, and processes. Kapag pinagsama-sama natin, or when we combine these aspects, no, it will ensure the company or the organization in achieving their objectives. And remember that the responsibility over governance is what? Is who? Sorry. It's the board of directors. Okay? And then again, here's an organizational structure showing the board. Then under the board, reporting is the president or the chief executive officer, and under the president are different officers, no? The C officers, also known as your COO, or the chief operating officer, or the vice president for operations. We also have the chief financial officer, or the VP for finance, and we also have here the CIO, or the chief information officer, or the VP for information technology or systems, no? But again, this is a generic organizational structure, no? Of course, we have different kind of organization. We have different also sets of officer aside from these ones that we have mentioned earlier. Okay, and remember, under the board, this is the management, no, from president up until the CEO officers. Okay, and then within the organization, within this box, we have, remember that the board can create different committees, and one of the committee that they can create is what we call the audit committee. Okay, so the audit committee has several functions. Of course, they are the ones who appoint the external auditors, the one who approves the audit program, the one who can also approve the remuneration that can be paid to the chief audit executive, no, and they can also approve the what we call internal audit charter. So actually, they have different functions, but more functions relating to approval. Okay. Then under the audit committee, no, outside the organization, we have the function external audit. No, they appoint the external audit. Okay, so what does the external audit do? They can also provide what we call assurance activities or engagements. They can also provide consulting engagements, but most likely they do the assurance engagements, particularly on financial statement audit. Okay, and then within the organization, we have also another team that report to them, and we call them what? The internal audit. Okay, so the internal audit performs most of the tests relating to the operations process of the company, no, and any finding that they have, they report to the audit committee. Okay, and remember that the internal audit should be what? Independent of the management. Okay, so in accordance with the standards or the ISPPIA, the internal audit should be independent from the management, because if they are not independent, meaning the internal audit has a duty or a administrative duty to any of these officers, no, there is an impairment in the independence aspect. Okay, so remember that the internal audit is functionally reporting to the audit committee, meaning their function as an audit team, no, they report the findings, their audit findings. While with regard to administrative tasks, meaning some of the tasks that they do not assume any management responsibility, they report to the president. they administratively report to the president. Okay? So that is the organizational structure showing the function or the 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 reporting line of the internal audit and external audit to the audit committee. Okay? And then now we go to a greater detailed discussion about corporate governance. Okay? And remember that the corporate governance, no, to become an effective for the company to have an effective corporate governance, they should have uh, the presence of the four pillars. And we have here the four pillars of audit committee, the internal audit, the executive management or the management, and we have also the external audit. Okay? As shown previously in the slide, no, if the company follows minimally this kind of organizational structure, they can have an effective corporate governance. Okay, and in this corporate governance framework, no, we are just showing what should be the ideal um, framework that should be followed by company to have an effective corporate governance. And we all know that the shareholders in here, they are the owners of the company. They appoint or elect the board of directors. Okay, and then the board of directors actually create different committees. And one example again is the audit committee. Please do remember that the board of directors can create different committees that is in accordance with what nature of business they have or they actually have. No, we have here the compensation committee, the nominations committee. We also have the remuneration committee, the risk committee. Okay, and then the board of directors again they appoint the officers or the management. No, again the president and the C officers, and the management should actually manage their internal control, and the internal control should operate effectively. No, and of course, the internal controls are being monitored by some audit mechanisms through the work of the audit team. Okay, and this audit committee should report or provide reasonable assurance to the board of directors and to the management of their findings. And please do remember that the control environment should be present. No, meaning this is the tone at the top. Meaning, if they have a good culture, most likely their corporate governance is effective. Okay, if they have reporting, so I mean they have reporting mechanisms and some accountability over some task, no. And again, we have two major components pertaining to governance. We have the strategic direction and the oversight function. So, first for the strategic direction, no, governance should determine the business model, meaning what should be the business when we say business model, should it be what type of revenue recognition would they uh, apply in terms of their business? Would they apply the per subscription basis? Would they follow the installment basis? Please do remember that most of the companies have different business models. Okay, we also have here the I mean the governance also determines the overall objective. So most likely the overall objective that we are referring here is the strategic objective, meaning the objectives that they plan to achieve or accomplish within um, more than most likely two more than 2 to 3 years in time. Okay, it will depend actually on the nature of the business of the company. Most likely, the companies or the manufacturing companies have a strategic objective that ranges from 3 years and above. But for those objectives that have, ay sorry, for most companies that have a higher, ang tawag doon, nagtagalog na ako, um, yung tinatawag doon, yung parang cycle, operational cycle that is more than 1 year, most likely their plan or their strategic objectives has a plan of more than 5 years. Okay? And of course, the governance also determines their approach to risk taking. Would they be risk loving or risk takers? Would they be risk neutral, meaning they just balance their appetite with regard to risk? Would they be risk averse, or they are afraid of taking high risk? Okay. We also have here that the governance determines the limits of their organizational conduct. So meaning they need to set a code of conduct indicating there what should be the acceptable conduct in doing their work. Okay? Excuse me. So next is the oversight component. So in here, the governance also um, should have an oversight of the risk management activities. Remember that the one who is ultimately responsible for the risk management is those who are charged in the governance. So meaning the board of directors. Okay, they should set what the policy, and then of course with regard to the policy and procedures or even the activity, it can be created by the management. No, they set the direction over this the risk management activities. Also, the governance has an oversight in the internal and external assurance activity as previously shown in the organizational structure. So meaning, uh, uh, of course, please do recall what I've mentioned that um, about my discussion about audit committee. The audit committee oversee the functions or the activities of the internal and external uh, auditors. Okay, that's I mean, sorry, that is what we meant by this internal and external assurance activities. Okay. Okay, as to the practices, okay, well, the governance should reflect unique culture and largely depend on it for effectiveness. So in here, of course, to have an effective or corporate governance, no, there should be a good organizational structure. Organizational culture with which sets the values, objectives, and strategies. They also need to define the role and behaviors. Of course, if we don't have any defined roles and responsibility, how can the people or the workers in the company perform or discharge their duties effectively? Okay, with regard to the behavior, of course, there is what we call the code of ethics, no, through their communication of their values. Of course, if a certain company wants to have a good, I mean, for example, for FEU, with FEU we have a value of fortitude, excellence, and uprightness. So that is the set expectation that the board of directors or those who are charged in governance that are expected uh, that are they are expecting from their of course officers, workers, students. Okay, and also in here the organizational culture should measure performance. Okay, of course if we define the roles and responsibility and we don't have any measurement of performance, how can we say that the worker is really doing their duty or roles or responsibility? Okay. Also, with the organizational culture, they specify the accountability. Who should be accountable over that action if any of the actions are not really helping in achieving or accomplishing the company's objectives? Okay. There should be one person accountable for any exceptions or well, it can be exceptional performance or what we call what do you call this substandard performance. Okay, and also governance ensures that the organization complies with society's legal and regulatory rules. So meaning of course with governance they should be um, well, we all know that companies can generate profit, but of course if you want to have a legal or an what you call this licit operations, they should adhere or comply with some of the laws and regulations. Okay? Of course, you don't want the company to engage with illegal activities such as for example, no, for I mean, this might sound an exaggeration. For example, what you call this? The company is being used as as an instrument in some drug operations in the country, just like that. So that is, of course, an illegal activity. Okay. So next, the governance also satisfy the generally accepted business norms and enhances the interest of stakeholders. Of course, with some of the benchmarking that the company is doing with another company within the same industry, they will know if their business activities are really just normal activity, or if not, no, if for strategic purposes, and if the governance can really provide rationale for creating such an activity outside the norm, as long as it's legal, then it's okay. Okay, and if that really creates an interest to the stakeholder with regard to really achieving the or accomplishing the objectives of the company. Okay, and the last one, the governance or the board of directors should what? Report fully and truthfully to its stakeholders. Remember that the aside from management, the board of directors has this what we call fiduciary responsibility in reporting how they really utilize the capital that they use for operations. So they need to provide them the results of the operations, meaning what is the bottom line figure, meaning the net income. They need to report it to their stakeholders. Okay? And of course, we also need to highlight here a local what you call this, a circular, no, pertaining to corporate governance for publicly listed companies. In here, it will state why we need some accountability, why we need some internal audit function within companies for some for publicly listed companies. When we say publicly listed companies, these are companies that are listed in the Philippine Stock Exchange. So this is SEC Memorandum Circular number 19, which is dated November 22, 2016. In here, the SEC has a definition of corporate governance. Their definition is that it is a system of stewardship and control to guide organizations in fulfilling their long-term, sorry, economic, moral, legal, and social obligations toward their stakeholders. It is also the same with the definition of IAA. Remember that I have already discussed this one, that they have um, an obligation to their stakeholders in terms of economic aspect, moral aspect, and legal and social aspect. So meaning economic, the profit; in terms of ethics, it's moral obligation to some of the stakeholders, no? Also with legal, meaning in adherence or compliance with some laws and regulations, and of course social obligations, meaning of course, with operations auditing, we'll have a discussion about corporate social responsibility. So, what is the societal, I mean, the social obligation of the company to the community? We have here the board of directors. So, the board of directors is actually the governing body elected by the stockholder. Again, no, that exercises the corporate powers of a corporation, that conducts all its business and controls its property. Again, this is more of a stewardship function. Now, with the management, no, the management is a group of executives given the authority, no, by the board of directors. So these are the appointed officials, no, representing the management of the company, which who are implementing the policies it has laid down in the conduct of the business of the corporation. Okay? we also have here the independent director. No, it is a person who is definitely independent, right, of management and the controlling shareholder, most likely, and is free from any business or other relationship which could reasonably be perceived to materially interfere with his exercise of independent judgment in carrying out his responsibility as a director. And when we say executive director, it is a director who has executive responsibility of day-to-day operations of part or the whole of the organization. So most likely, the independent director, this is outside the organization. When we say executive director, this is within the organization who has an executive responsibility of overseeing the day-to-day operations of the company. Okay, and we also have if we have executive director, we have also a non-executive director. When we say non-executive director, it is a director who actually has no executive responsibility and does not perform any work related to the operations of the corporation. No, most likely the executive director might be a member of the management. Okay, and a non-executive director, they can be a shareholder but not part of the management. So meaning they are non-executive director. They are just doing their job in of course approving some of their in accordance with their role, no? Kung ano ba yung role nila, no? They can also provide some recommendations. They can also um, provide some vote with regard to quorum, no? Kung may mga decision, there should be a quorum and there should be a vote, no? Yung mga tipong ganon. Okay? And they also have here the next is the principles, no, under the Code of Corporate Governance for Publicly Listed Companies. So first is one principle is what we call the establishing a competent board, no? The company should be headed by a competent working board to foster the long-term success of the corporation and to sustain its competitiveness and profitability in a manner consistent with its objective and the long-term best interest of its shareholders and other stakeholders. Okay? The next principle is what we call establishing clear roles and responsibility of the board. Now again, we're going back to the fiduciary responsibility, no? The fiduciary roles, responsibility, and accountabilities of the board as provided under the law, the company's articles and bylaws. So by this time, no, you are familiar with the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, right? So and other legal pronouncement and guidelines should be clearly made known to all the directors as well as to the shareholders and other stakeholders. Okay? Another principle is what we call establishing the board committee. So in relation to what I've presented earlier, wherein in the corporate governance framework, there are some committees created under the board of director. So this board committee should be set up to the extent possible to support the effective performance of the board's functions. Now, particularly with respect to audit, no, risk management, related party transactions, and other key corporate governance concerns such as nomination, remuneration, risk. Okay? Excuse me. In here, no, the composition, function, and responsibility of all committees established should be contained in a publicly available committee charter. So if in internal audit we have an internal audit charter, in here we also have a committee charter pertaining to how would be the policy and the procedure in terms of creating committee within the board of directors that has special functions, no? The next principle, we need to highlight here the second principle wherein the board should establish audit committee, no, to enhance its oversight capability over the company's financial reporting, internal control system, internal and external audit process, and compliance with applicable laws and regulations. The committee should be composed of at least 3 appropriately qualified non-executive director, the majority of whom, including the chairman, should be independent. Okay? All of the members of the committee must have a relevant background, knowledge, skills, and or expertise in the areas of accounting, auditing, and finance. No, the chairman of the audit committee should not be the chairman of the board or of any other committee. So under SEC circular number 67, ba? Sorry, 19. 19, no? Again, there should be an audit committee which should comprise of at least three um, qualified non-executive director, and they should be independent, no, including the chairman, no. And if you can recall, no, if you have a discussion with regard to the provisions of SOX Act of 2002, in the US, at least one of the member of the audit committee should at least have a knowledge, skill, and experience in the areas of accounting, auditing, and finance. But in the Philippines, no, the SEC said that all of the members should have a relevant background, knowledge, skills, and experience in that said area. So why? Because of course, in terms of the roles and functions of the audit committee, it touches the disciplines of accounting, auditing, and finance. Because of course, with external audit, they do the financial statement audit, and they also evaluate the operating effectiveness of the controls in relation to the financial reporting, right? Okay, so in that sense, in that one role of the audit committee or function of the audit committee, no, they should have at least a background in these said disciplines. Otherwise, if they don't have any experience, knowledge, and skills in these areas, no, how would they? I mean, would they be competent enough to make a decision in terms of selecting their external auditor in doing the FS audit? In relation to internal audit, would they have that experience and skills in approving or knowing the details of the audit program? Because if they don't have any skills and knowledge in these areas, um, might probably they will approve the audit program just as it is without even creating or scrutinizing or making any proper inquiries with regard to the content of the audit program. Okay? So again, we'll go to the discussion of audit committee. In here, the audit committee has the following duties and responsibility among others. So we have one, recommends the approval of the internal audit charter or the IA charter. Okay, so an internal audit charter contains the authorities, the responsibility of the internal audit function. So basically, it also defines the roles and responsibility of the internal audit team. Okay, so they recommend the approval of the internal audit charter. Okay. Through the IA department, no, sorry, they monitor and evaluate the adequacy and effectiveness of the corporation's internal control system, okay, the integrity of financial reporting, and the security of physical and information assets. So these are most likely the objectives of the company that has a relation to the audit committee function. No, through the internal audit team, no, the internal audit team will evaluate, no, will review and report any findings. So through that function, no, they can also monitor and evaluate, no, the said three objectives in terms of internal control system, the integrity of financial reporting in terms of reporting, and of course in terms of safeguarding the assets, the third item here. Okay, in here the audit committee also oversees the internal audit department and recommends the appointment, no, and or the grounds for approval of an internal audit head or the CAE or the chief audit executive. So I've mentioned earlier that they can recommend the appointment or they can also recommend the removal of the CAE if the CAE is not doing his or her job effectively. Okay. Next, function of the audit committee is that it establishes and identifies the reporting line of the internal auditor to enable him to properly fulfill his duties and responsibility. Okay, so please do remember that the internal audit, no, it should be what functionally reporting to the audit committee, and the internal audit team should have no or should not assume any management responsibility. They can administratively report to the president through their audit findings, but they do not need to perform some management responsibility or activities. No, for example, in terms of crafting policy, um, creating policies and procedures, implementing some recommendations, they should not do that job. No, they can only recommend, they can only facilitate, they can only provide assistance, they can provide consultation, but do not assume management responsibility. Okay, through that line, no, in the organizational structure, the internal audit team is independent of the management. If the internal audit team again is reporting to the president functionally, then the internal audit function is not really doing its job well, because they can be easily swayed by the decisions by of the president or the management team, and they can assume some management responsibility if that is the case. Okay, of course, the audit committee should also review and monitors management responsiveness to the internal auditor's findings and recommendation. Now, through that reporting line of the internal auditor to the audit committee, the internal audit can now enforce their role in really monitoring or creating a follow-up with regard to any recommendations that the management has proposed to the finding made by the auditor. Okay? I think last na yata to. Hindi pa. Okay. Prior to the commencement of the audit, no, in here, the audit committee discusses with the external auditor the nature, the scope, and the expenses of the audit and ensures the proper coordination. Okay? In here, I need to highlight here that the audit committee is actually appointing the external auditor. They are the ones who is responsible for that. They recommend it to the board for the approval. Now, if the external auditor has been appointed, the nature, no? I mean, when we say nature, what is the kind of engagement would the external auditor would do or provide a service to the company? Would they do FS audit, consulting engagement, mga tipong ganun, no? And what should be the scope? The scope meaning what should be the extent, no? It can be a time scope of time scope, like let's say for example doing audit for the ranging for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, just like that, no? And also when we say scope, would that be department wide, would that be division wide, would that be a certain area only? Okay, and then we say expenses, what amount of audit fee should they agree on in relation to the nature and scope of the audit. In here, ensuring the proper coordination, in here we need the help of the CAE or the Chief Audit Executive. Of course, we don't want the work of the external audit to be replicated, or there is a double work to be done, because it might probably that the external audit already perform some test of controls and provide a conclusion over that test of controls. Through coordination, they can provide the results of this test of control to the internal audit so as to provide double work. No, para hindi na dobleng trabaho, yun ang ibig sabihin, no? Ang hirap pag-English, no? Um, so if a certain external auditor perform a test of control over the receivable, the internal audit can rely on that work of the external audit. Of course, there are some factors that to be considered to rely on the work of the external audit. Okay? They also evaluate and determines the non-audit work, if any, of the external auditor. So meaning non-audit work, it can be consulting engagement, no? It can be a due diligence engagement, it can be a business process improvement, okay? And periodically reviews the non-audit fees paid to the external auditor, sorry, in relation to the total fees paid to him and to the corporation's overall consultancy expenses. Of course, the same with the audit engagement, they should also review the non-audit fees that are being paid to the external audit. If it really, if it commensurates with the efforts being provided or the work provided by the external audit. Okay? The next would be reviews and approves the interim and annual financial statements before their submission to the board. Okay? Of course, if you want to present an information to the board, it should be audited. Okay? Now, with companies that are publicly listed to the corporations, most likely they have quarterly reports. And before they issue it to the public, there should be an interim audit over that quarterly financial statement. No? These are short-term period audits. It should be also audited before it can be submitted to the board for any scrutiny, before any decisions that can be made based on the performance of the company and based on the amounts in the statement of financial position, statement of income, and some of the reports or financial statements. Okay. Also in here, no, they are particular in really reviewing the audit report because of course they should particularly focus on matters such as any changes in accounting policy and practices, no, areas where a significant amount of judgment has been exercised, no, third, significant adjustments resulting from the audit if there are any audit. Of course, if there are any assumptions relating to going concern, no, it might probably that the company is at a loss position, no, would they be adopting the what are the going concern assumptions, no, that they can actually provide. Okay. Also complies with some accounting standards, compliance with tax, legal and regulatory requirements. And lastly, no, in here, the um, they also should review, no, I mean the audit committee should also review the disposition of the recommendation in the external auditor's management letter. So when we say external auditor's management letter, these are the external auditor's list of findings with regard to any for example, control deficiencies that they've noted in relation to financial reporting. Okay? So, of course, the external auditor would not anymore monitor the recommendation, no, after their work, no, after issuing the financial statement. That's when the external audit work ends, no. Of course, with the findings or the management letter provided by the external auditor, it should be the follow-up procedure should be assumed by the audit committee through the help of the internal audit. The internal audit will now monitor the recommendation set by the management in relation to the findings by the external auditors. Okay? So in here, we now go to the some of the definition of terms that you will commonly hear in operations auditing. And of course, some of the terms here are excerpt from the from the ISPPIA, or the International Standards for the Professional Practice of Internal Auditing. So we have here the board. Based from the IPPF glossary, it is the highest level of governing body charged with the responsibility, no, again, to direct or oversee the activities and management of the organization. Typically, this includes an independent group of directors such as a board of director, a supervisory board, or a board of governors or trustees. For trustees, these are applicable for non-stock corporations such as association, what else? Education institutions, foundation. So, if there are no stocks involved, we do not call them board of directors but board of trustees. Again, the board is the highest level of governing body charged with the responsibility to direct or oversee the activities and management of the organization. No? If such a group does not exist, no, the board may refer to the head of the organization. Board may refer to an audit committee to which the governing body has delegated certain functions. So, in the IPPF, or the International Professional Practices Framework, okay, we can interchangeably use the words board and audit committee. Okay? Now, another term, what we call internal audit activity, or the IAA. When we say IAA, no, in the IPPF, in short, this is your internal audit team. Okay, with the IPPF glossary, your IAA is a department, division, team of consultants, or other practitioners that provide independent, objective assurance, and consulting services designed to add value and improve an organization's operation. So it seems that the some phrase some portions of the definition here in the IAA is actually excerpted from the definition of internal auditing. Okay, and of course, with the BSIA student, I know you are very, very familiar with the definition of internal auditing. Okay, am I right? There's a there's a portion here wherein we got a portion of the definition from the internal audit, but we mix it with a term, a department or division who provides this kind of function, what we call internal auditing. Okay. So we have also here the CAE. Okay. In the Philippines, most likely CAE is common for big companies, but in other they can be also called what do you call this, chief internal auditor. They can also be called VP for internal audit, no? But in the IPPF, they are also called the CAE, or Chief Audit Executive. So our CAE describes a person in a senior position responsible for effectively what? Managing the internal audit activity. So they are the one who is really managing the internal audit activity, or the internal audit department or team, in accordance with the internal audit charter. Again, your internal audit charter, this is a document containing the authority, the responsibility of the internal audit team. Okay? And of course, in accordance with the definition of the internal auditing, the code of ethics, and the standards. The specific job title of the Chief Audit Executive may vary across organizations. Of course, with the some guidance, no, of the standards, we have set there some of the roles and functions of the CAE. But of course, there are some functions of the CAE that may vary across organizations. Of course, the CE can be sometimes a what we call this chief ethics officer. They can also perform that kind of job. They can also be the chief risk officer. Um, if that is the case, if that is the case, there should be a what you call this a mitigating control. Of course, you cannot perform audit no on yourself no or what we call self review threat no. If you assume that kind of responsibility, make sure there is a safeguard over that function no, and make sure if there is an assurance engagement that involves checking or reviewing the work of the CAE involving some task no, might probably the organizational is relatively small no, the internal audit should not review really the work of the CAE. It can be reviewed by a third party. It can be reviewed by a external auditor providing consultancy engagements or consulting engagements no, just like that. Okay, next definition, what is assurance? Okay, so actually our definition here is assurance is not coming from the IPPF. Of course, you have already encountered this definition in your auditing and assurance principle. So, what is assurance? Assurance means an engagement, no, in performing. Means an engagement in which a practitioner expresses a conclusion designed to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended users other than responsibility party about the outcome of the evaluation or measurement of the subject matter against criteria that is in accordance with the international framework for assurance engagement. Of course, we have a local counterpart here. No, might probably the Philippine framework for assurance engagements. Okay, and I think no, you have discussed the definition um, portion by portion. Okay, so let's give some context over this definition. Okay, when we say practitioner, this practitioner should be what independent and objective. And who are these practitioners? They are the auditors. They can express a conclusion. Now, when we say conclusion, it can be opinion. Okay, but in accordance with the IFAE or the PFAE, no, we are using the word conclusion. No, actually, we providing an opinion is optional. Okay, of course, if we are doing some audit procedures, we provide some conclusion. In the final report, no, when we perform all the audit procedures, we provide opinion to the financial statement audit. That is the requirement by the standards, right? But of course, in not all, no, engagements, opinion is required. It's only optional. Specifically for consulting engagements. Okay? The degree of confidence of the intended users. When we say degree of confidence, based from the conducted audit procedures, we can provide some degree of confidence and we can provide what kind of reasonable assurance only. No, we can provide some limited assurance, no? Limited assurance is applicable for consulting engagements. However, for what do you call this? For reasonable assurance, it is applicable for assurance engagements. And remember that we also have another type of assurance, what we call absolute assurance. Absolute assurance is what? Suntok sa buwan. No? Wala talagang, we don't have any absolute assurance. We cannot provide 100% perfect audit that we don't see any what you call this finding, we don't see any our conduct of audit are perfect, that we don't anymore what you call this, I forgot the term in taga in English, in other words, hindi tayo 100% sure na na-cover natin lahat. Of course, we do audit based on risk. Of course, there are some areas that we don't really focus so much. So we cannot provide limited assurance. We can only provide reasonable assurance, and that's the highest form of assurance that we can provide to our stakeholders or intended users. So again, so for that next term, intended users. So who are our intended users? It will depend who will be the users of that report or audit report. Most likely, the users of the audit report will be the stakeholder, right? Okay. Of course, the user should be other than the responsible party. Of course, if the management has this function or overseeing the day-to-day activities, no, they have, I mean, they generate profits, no, they need to have it audited, no, and of course, the intended users, no, in here, management is not included. They are not the intended users. Since they have a fiduciary responsibility over the utilization of the assets or the capital of the company, no, it should be subjected to audit. And once audited, it should be provided to intended users, providing some degree of confidence. Okay, when we say about outcome of the evaluation, outcome in here, we are relating to FS audit. Okay, so that's an example. The outcome, the what you call this, the financial statements. That's the outcome. Okay, in accordance of the, sorry, outcome of the evaluation or measurement of a subject matter. Okay, so subject matter. Oh, so sorry. When we say subject matter, anything that is that the intended users wants to have it audited. No, for example, that's the FS. Now the outcome, what is the details within that subject matter? Okay, and what should be the criteria that we use? Okay, with the FS audit, we use the criteria. What do you call this? I forgot the term. Philippine Accounting Standards, and also with PFRs or the Philippine Financial Reporting Standards. So that is in the context of FS audit. Of course, if we are doing some assurance work, no, there is another set. It will depend what will be the report that will be providing to our intended users. Okay, it can be some set of standards. For example, well, for example na lang siguro ISO, no, may mga criteria tayong sinusunod doon, mga tipong ganon. Okay. Next, why do we need assurance, no? Or why do you need assurance? First is there is a potential bias in providing information. So remember, since the reports we are providing to our stakeholders might be a measure of performance, and there can be a tied up of some of the benefits of the management, there is a possibility that the management will be biased in presenting the information to the stakeholders. Okay, through assurance, they can do the check and balance to know if what has been represented by the management is really reflected on the documents. Okay. Of course, of course, in here, why do we need assurance? The remoteness between a user and an organization or trading partner. So again, who are the users of this information? Like for the financial statement, it's the stakeholders, right? Of course, the stakeholders are not. I mean, the stakeholders are not really part of the day-to-day operations, or they do not oversee. Okay, that's the meaning of remoteness. Since the stakeholders or the shareholders are not part of the any activities of the company, and due to that remoteness, assurance is needed. Okay, they have another a third party or uh, a practitioner who is not part of doing that job. No? They can provide that assurance in order to fill out that gap in terms of remoteness. Okay. Of course, why do we need assurance? Complexity of the transactions, information, or processing the system. We need experts, but as what we've mentioned, these are your practitioners. Um, we need some proficient practitioners who can understand the complexity of the transactions. And since they know the complexity of the transactions, they can actually communicate or articulate it well to their, to the shareholders in terms how would they explain it in layman's term that can be comprehensible by the intended user. So, in here, the potential bias in providing information includes the sellers, the management, the inside information, the compensation of management, and stock options held by the management. When you say management, again, your management is includes here the president, the C officers. Of course, if they have this fiduciary responsibility again of managing well the capital or the assets of the company. If they do not perform well, no, they can be fired by the board of directors. Of course, if they want to be retained in that position and they are not performing well, there's an opportunity for them to, you know, misrepresent some of the financial information to be provided to the management. Well, also we have here the compensation of the management, no. Of course, with the compensation of management, parang yung example ko kanina, we provide compensation to our management. It might probably their increase or increase is dependent on their performance. Of course, if they want to have an increase or want to have a bonus or stock options, they need to do some antics in order for them to really give a good misrepresented report in terms of their performance. Okay, so ito yung example natin, stock options. Okay, so rin yung example ko kanina. Okay, yon, no. So in here, no, this people or these instances may have different interests, no, in obtaining and reading financial information. No? However, they have to obtain this information with reasonable assurance that this can be relied upon and presented with a certain degree of objectivity. Okay? Yan. So, in terms of remoteness, no, we have here the global society. We have the lack of personal interaction, can't physically inspect the goods, can't interview the management, and can't inspect the facility, and also can't review the books and records. So these are some of the examples of what we call the remoteness of users. They have this limit, no? Possible that the company has this global scale, they can operate in different jurisdictions. So it might probably that the shareholders based on US, they have operations in Philippines, like for example Procter and Gamble. So how would that user of that information have an access to the operations if he is really remote to that area? Okay, so that's what we meant by the global society. No, we also have lack of personal interaction. Again, if they are not part of the day-to-day activity, this also includes the lack of personal interaction. Of course, if they are not part of the day-to-day operations, they most likely they can also inspect the goods, no. Of course, they can also interview the management, no. Of course, they can appoint have an appointment with them, but not on the spot, no, yung mga tipong ganun, no. They can also inspect the facility and review the books and records. Okay, so not really in absolute way, but in a realistic way, they cannot do this or perform this task, no. So through that assurance, it will address these limits. Okay. So what is assurance service, no? In here, assurance service or assurance engagements are three-party contracts in which assurers reports on the quality of the information. And assurance is a broad concept, no? In here, the assurance will cover a wide spectrum of services, a more diverse group of users, and a greater potential users. No, ito yung nako-cover ng assurance services, no? And for the value of assurance, no, the assurance function gives investor, creditors, and user of information the confidence in the accuracy of data. So that's the value of assurance, which we have already discussed earlier. Also, the value of assurance then is in the confidence it generates in users of the information. Okay, so of course, if we are an external party, we are an external auditor providing opinion as to the fairness of the disclosures in the statement of financial position. Through that opinion that we provide as to the in the audit report, we provide confidence to our users, and of course, the confidence it generates in users, no, it provides again value. Okay, for example, a bank, if they see that the FS or the financial statements are audited by an external auditor, they have this confidence that they can rely on this information. For example, that they have this kind of good financial ratio, a good bottom line figure, they can provide credit line, or provide they can approve loan application if that company is applying for a loan. Okay? Do you think a company would approve a loan if the financial statement provided by the company is not audited? I think not, no? Of course, they are not confident really in the representations of the management or the company. If an external party or a third party provide that kind of assurance, then it will generate confidence on it will generate confidence on that bank, no? Ibig sabihin, ano sila, tiwala sila na sige, okay tayo mag-extend ng loan sa company. Okay? And then we have here the three elements of the assurance service, no? We have here the three-party relationship. We have here the subject matter. We have here the evidence, and we have here the suitable criteria, and then we have here the written report. Okay, so I think familiar naman kayo sa elements ng assurance service. Okay, so when you say three-party relationship, includes the assurer, the assuree, and the responsible party, no? Ibig sabihin, si assurer, si practitioner. Si assurer yung intended user. Si responsible party, sila yung may responsible over that subject matter. Tama ba? Yun yung three-party relationship. It should have a three-party relationship. Okay? Now, meron din tayong tinatawag na consultancy, pero hindi siya three-party relationship. Two-party relationship lang siya. We have here the consultant and we have here the client. So, two-party relationship lang yung sa consulting. Dito, three-party pagdating sa assurance service. When we say subject matter, ang example na lang natin ha, kasi mas nakaka-relate kayo siguro sa assurance principle. We have there the FS or the financial statement. In terms of operations audit, the result of the operations, pwedeng ganun. In terms of evidence includes such as documentation, the audit procedures, the vouch documents, no, the scanned documents, that is a supporting document to the audit procedure. That is an evidence, no? Work paper, that is an evidence. Now, for the suitable criteria, your suitable criteria, if we are referring to financial statement audit, it's again your PAS or your PFRS. Okay, your written report, it's your audit report. In terms of operations audit, it's your operations audit report. Okay? So, for the three-party relationship, so ito nga yun, hindi ni-discuss ko. So, we have here the practitioner. The term practitioner is a broader term than the term auditor. No? Expert may also be engaged by practitioners to perform assurance services. So, yung practitioner, sabi ko nga, in the context of FS audit, it's your auditor, your external audit. Of course, there are some experts that can provide also assurance. No? Examples natin ng mga experts are, of course, in terms of research, yung mga expert natin talaga, yung mga researchers, mga tipong ganun. No? Of course, they perform some assurance engagement din. No? Of course, with some example natin, pathologists, no, in terms of medical, they are the doctor of doctors. They provide assurance over the finding of a doctor. That is a pathologist. Naintindihan? Then we also have the responsible party, or the one who is responsible over that subject matter. So ito 'yon. Okay? The responsible party may or may not be the party who engages the practitioner or the engaging party. No, for example, with FS audit, they are not the one, no, the management, no, the responsible party in FS or the financial statement. They are not the one who engage actually the practitioner. Remember, sino? It is the audit committee. Okay, and then for the intended users, these are your persons or class of person for whom the practitioner prepares the assurance report. So in short, these are your stakeholders. No, ang example natin kanina, the example that we have is the bank, right? Intended users may be identified by the agreement between the practitioner and the responsible party or by the law. No, pwedeng ano siya, agreement lang, no? Kung sino yung user. No, pwedeng kunwari a government, no? For example, yung recent issue with the reports issued by the COA. So the intended users there is the what? The public. No? The government agency is responsible for the usage or utilization of the fund that has been provided by the Department of Budget and Management. No? It should be audited by COA as to its utilization. No, if they do not or did not utilize the fund very well, of course in the deliberation during the budget preparation in the DBM, no, it should be reduced, no, if you remember your accounting for government. Okay, so here's a diagrammatic summary of assurance service engagement. So for the three-party relationship, we have here the user, we have here the user, the responsible party, and the independent auditor. So the responsible party is responsible to the user for the subject matter or assertion to the user. Okay, so remember your assertions. These are your representations by the management, no? Okay. Then we also have here the responsible party should acknowledge responsibility for the subject matter or assertion. So, how do we acknowledge the responsibility for the subject matter? Through what? It's the what? Statement of management responsibility. That's correct. Okay? So, we have also here the independent auditor who expresses conclusion or opinion on subject matter or assertion. So, they are the one who is responsible in providing or expressing a conclusion or opinion. Okay? Kasi guys, ganito, medyo may konting gaps pa yung some of the standards in the Philippine standards on auditing versus IPPF and ISPPIA. Okay? In the PSA or Philippine Standards on Auditing, no, when we say express and conclusion, parang they are it is interchangeably the word can be interchangeable with the word also opinion. Pero in the ISPPIA or in the International Standards for the Professional Practice of Internal Auditing, conclusion and opinion are not the same. Okay, so opinion is only what you call this option, but conclusion is a requirement. what would be your conclusion over the performance of that audit procedure that addresses the audit objective or objectives if maraming nakita na audit objectives. Okay? Okay, ito. Next, we have here the subject matter. No? Subject matters have different characteristics. Example would be your qualitative, quantitative. Your subject matter example natin in the context of FS audit is what? Financial statement. So that is what? Quantitative. No, we also can be, the subject matter can also be qualitative. No, it can be compliance or adherence with some certain laws and regulation, then that is qualitative. Unless in some of the regulation, it requires some quantitative measures. No? Pero kung qualitative, let's say if nag-adhere with some documentary requirements, then that is qualitative. It can also be objective or subjective. No? Most of our subject matter is objective. We don't use subjective, no? So as not to really use our emotions, no? With regard to providing a conclusion or an opinion. It can also be historical versus prospective. Historical in terms of financial statement, it is historical because we audit past event or past transaction or past financial transactions. With prospective, this is more applicable to operations audit. It is future oriented. We are proactive. We are looking for some vulnerabilities or threats that would hinder the company in achieving its objectives, in accomplishing or achieving its objectives. So that is prospective. Okay, and relates to a point in time or covers a period. It can be, as I've mentioned earlier, its coverage or its scope can be in a certain period, for example, a 1 year period. It can also be on a more than 1 year period. It can be on a 5 year period. It can be in a short-term period such as interim periods, quarterly, semi-annual, mga ganun. No, pwedeng monthly din, no, pero medyo madugo 'yun. Okay? So again, subject matters have different characteristics which may affect the precision, no, with which the subject matter can be evaluated or measured against criteria. Okay? And persuasiveness of available evidence. When I say persuasiveness, so the what you call this, ano yung other term for persuasiveness? The convincing power of that available evidence. Remember that an evidence that is external, meaning generated outside the company or the management, is more persuasive than documents generated within the company. That's what we call persuasiveness of available evidence. Remember, in the audit of your accounts receivable, we have their confirmation of accounts receivable. We also have there the bank confirmation. Through that confirmation, they are the most persuasive evidence available in terms of in terms of cash balance, assuring the accuracy of the or the value of the amount of cash, and also with the accounts receivable. Now with inventory, the most persuasive available evidence is what? Anyone? What is the most persuasive evidence that we can have over the inventory? Anyone? Almayra, ko ba yan? Sorry, I don't know kung hindi kita narinig. Hello? Hello? Mahina yata signal ko. Okay, sige. Sorry, Almayra, I can't hear you eh. I don't know if ako yung may problem. Pero the most persuasive available evidence that we can have in ascertaining the assertion of existence over the inventory is what? The anyone? Physical count. No, just merely by observing the physical count of inventory, it is the most persuasive available evidence that we can have in ascertaining what the existence of the inventory. Okay? So review to, no? Sige. So, again, here are the characteristics of a suitable criteria. So, meaning what should be the criteria that the practitioner should base upon in terms of evaluating the subject matter. No, the suitable criteria must be relevant. It should also be should also be complete. It should also be reliable. It should be neutral, and it can be comprehensible, or it can be easily understood. Okay, when we say relevant, of course, if we are doing audit, FS audit, the most relevant that we can have for a suitable criteria in doing FS audit is what? The Philippine Accounting Standards, or the PFRS. And it should be complete. No, of course, with the Philippine Accounting Standards and PFRS, it's a set of complete accounting standards that we can use as a benchmark in checking if the accounting policy and procedures follow that standard. Okay, when we say reliability, the suitable criteria should be reliable. It should be There should be a consensus or an agreement over a professional body saying that that standard is applicable to all the use applicable to all industry, or applicable to the world, no, or for a set of geographical location. But in the case of international financial reporting standards and um, international accounting standards, most of the countries, no, um, follows the standards. So reliable siya. No, lalo na if there are countries who are adopting these standards. When we say neutrality, the subject matter should not be biased, no? It should be um, in the set of users, it should be neutral, meaning it should not be in favor of one industry, no, and detrimental to another industry. And understandability, of course, we are accountants, we are auditors, we should easily understand the standards, no. It should be in terms of interpretation, as much as possible, you are um, taking an interpretation na pare-parehas kayo. You are have the same interpretation. So, understandable siya. Kasi kung iba-ibang interpretation, then it's not understandable. It is not clear. Okay, of course, there are some standards. So if you are already if you already encounter a certain problem, no, there are some areas, gray areas, that are still subject for interpretation, no. Kasi of course, with some industry, like let's say for example specialist industry, a certain standard is applicable for that certain industry. Let's say for example with PAS 39, PFRS 1, no. And next, we also have, okay, in terms of evidence, no, we should take note that the evidence is should be it should have, sorry, it should have, no, tama, the attributes that it should be sufficient and appropriate. Okay? Paano natin masasabi, how do we say that an evidence is sufficient? How do we say that an evidence is appropriate? Okay, in here, the practitioner performs an assurance engagement with an attitude of professional skepticism. Okay, again, you hear the word professional skepticism to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence about whether the subject matter information is free of material misstatement. Of course, as auditor, again, I've mentioned, we are skeptical. The management represents some assertion. Of course, we do not initially believe to what management has represented. We should perform some tests. Let's say, for example, test of controls and substantive test. Okay, if the results of the substantive test is aligned with what has been represented by the management, then we can say that um, it is, it has no, what you call this, no audit significance as of that matter of performing the audit procedure. Okay? Of course, one example again is your receipt of your bank confirmation. If the bank confirmation ties up with the balance in your cash, then you have that confidence that the management's representation over the accuracy, no, or the amount stated in the cash really reflects with the bank statement, or it really exists also. Okay? What we are saying here is that in order for us to perform our job well, we need to be skeptical. No, we don't just believe in what has been represented by the management. No, in order for us to say that uh, the assertion or the representation is really what they are, it should be sufficient and appropriate. When we say sufficiency, it is a measure of quantity of evidence. When we say appropriateness, it is the measure of the quality of the evidence. Okay, remember that it is, I mean, between the two, uh, which of the two we put more emphasis to say that the evidence is persuasive or more persuasive? It is what? The appropriateness. Sometimes the quantity does not ensure quality. Maybe you have a number of set of one evidence, but it is not really persuasive to us, no? It should be appropriate. Of course, if you um, um, have both the attributes present for the evidence, then good, no? But most likely, ang merong mas weight ay yung appropriateness. Pwedeng isa lang yung quantity ng evidence mo, pero you have a strong quality or a good quality of evidence that provides you strong evidence. Okay? Of course, there are some audit procedures that mas incline sa sufficiency. Okay? Than appropriateness. For example, the test of quantity. That's how we address the sufficiency of the evidence, no? Okay, if you have heard the test of quantity as discussed by your assurance principal professor. Okay? So guys, give me just 2 slides more, no, before I end the class. No, sorry for the overtime. No. In here, the assurance report, no. The last element of the assurance services, no. In here, the practitioner provides a written report containing a conclusion that conveys the assurance obtained about the subject matter information. Okay, so it contains basically the conclusion or the opinion. Okay, a practitioner normally can express 2 levels of assurance in an assurance service. One again is a reasonable level, and the other is a limited level of assurance. Okay, the reasonable in terms of FS audit, limited in terms of due diligence report or due diligence review. Okay, so again, here's a level, the 3 levels of assurance that we can provide. One is a reasonable assurance. Example nito, again, it's the audit opinion in your FS. Second will be your limited assurance, such as reviewed financial statements or your review of financial statement. Pwede ring due diligence. And lastly, no assurance such as compilation of financial statement. We do not provide any assurance over the compilation of financial statement. When we say compilation of financial statement, the auditor can create that financial statement. And since the practitioner compiles the financial statement, they cannot provide assurance. If they provide assurance, it is a self-review threat. Naintindihan? Of course, there's another level of assurance, what we call absolute assurance, pero we did not include it in here. Okay? Again, your absolute assurance is a 100% assurance and it is not possible. Suntok sa buwan yun. Okay?